Darkcast Network. Welcome to the dark side of podcasts.
It's early morning and the air is crisp. The sky is still holding on to the darkness of night, and you blink yourself awake. You lace up your shoes, press play on your favorite playlist, and allow the music to fill your ears as you step into the quiet. It is the same exact thing that you have done countless times. But as your feet hit the pavement, a thought creeps in. What if I don't make it home? If you have ever tightened your grip on your keys, scanned the surroundings not once, but multiple times, turned to look over your shoulder, ran faster, shared your location, or desperately searched for someone else to be nearby, you are not alone. For far too many women, the simplest act of running, of reclaiming peace, strength, and freedom has ended in tragedy. These women who have trained hard, loved harder, are more than just a victim. Their vanished footsteps echoed a reality that is rarely spoken, yet always on our mind. Fear is a companion that many women carry on every single run. Welcome to Girl Gone Running, a Tragedy with a View series where we tell the stories of the women who went out for a run and never came home. It is not about her death, it is about her life, the voice she no longer has, and the warning signs that we can't afford to ignore. Because what is happening on these days was not random. And as we dig deeper, we find that it changes everything. Welcome back to Tragedy with a View. Hello, welcome back. I am your host, Kayla, and we are going to dive right in on this one. When Jane Carver set out for her run, it would arguably start out feeling much less like a beautiful June day and much more like a puzzle, pieces slowly falling together over the course of time. And even in a very safe city, it would be a completely different jurisdiction that would find the piece that was missing and brought the whole case together. Fountain Valley in Orange County, California, you probably have heard of this area, is a upper middle class cookie cutter suburbs, and all things considered, it is great and safe place to live. Generally, the crime rate is smaller than average for a city in the United States, and that is exactly what Al and Jane Carver were looking for in a home and a community. They got married in 1973 and would move to Fountain Valley some years later. Al worked as a director of operations at a healthcare company, and Jane was a flight attendant for United Airlines. They would have two boys, first Cliff, and then 6 years later, they would have Justin. And they seemed like the average happy American family. Jane, who went by Janie, was very adventurous. She loved to travel and try new things, and Al was much more reserved. Those who knew the couple said that while they were on opposite ends of the spectrum, they still respected each other and balanced each other's energies. Janie had previously taken her son on spontaneous trips, as reported by Cliff, who said later that they were once studying state capitals in school, and when she realized that she had a flight to Washington, D.C., she decided to just take him on that flight so that way he could experience Washington, D.C. in real life rather than just from a textbook. Remember, this was a different time. Flights and travel were not as rigid as they are today when it comes to their rules and regulations. At 46, Janie was just really spontaneous, and she was described as a dedicated worker, but also a great mother. She never had things planned out. She just went with what was happening and made the most out of those moments. But that would all change. On Saturday, June 10th, 1995, Janie left home in the morning to go for a 4-mile run. This was something that she did frequently, and Al would also join her as often as he could. They would wave at neighbors as they ran past, sometimes with their dog, a collie, and it was Al who got Janie into running. But on this day, he had some chores to do and decided to stay home so that way he could get those done. Just as she is finishing up her run, she is approached at an intersection right outside of her home, the intersection of Warner Avenue and Mount Marcus Street, right across the street from Fountain Valley Regional Hospital. So this is a busy intersection. It's 8 a.m., and as she slows to wait for some traffic, a man walks up to her. He indicates to his car and then tells her to get in. Janie says no. There are other people there, and they can hear her saying, "No, no, please no." She begins to try to put some distance between them, when the man, without a warning and with no hesitation, pulls out a gun and shoots her in the face. While there were many people there, there was only one person who saw this interaction. Standing across the street in the comfort of his open garage, he watches as this man approaches Janie and then pulls out this weapon and shoots her. He doesn't even look around before he walks back into his car, gets in, and drives away. The bullet entered just below the left eye, killing Janie instantly. And as her legs give out beneath her, she falls into the landscape flower bed area by the road. Several minutes later, Al, who is still home and working on bills, hears sirens coming down the road, and he felt compelled to step up and look outside to see what was happening. This is not an unusual thing for people to do, to be a little nosy when they hear sirens. It happens all the time. But he had no idea what he was about to step into as he steps onto his front porch. But there, on the ground, 300 yards away from their driveway, is Janie. Al sees her on the ground and he sprints to her side. Janie's death is unfortunate, but also luckily fast and unavoidable. The damage that was done would never have been able to be repaired in time, even with the hospital literally across the street. At the time, Clifford was 20 years old and in Oregon for college classes at Oregon State University, and Justin was 14 and still asleep in his bed. News stations start to show up, and Al talks to one person before he finally tells them to leave them alone, along with their boys. But as we know, the media kind of sucks. They're doing their job, but there's also no respect for grief or mourning when it comes to getting the next big story. Of course, there is very little evidence that was left behind at the scene besides some witnesses. Really, the only thing that they found was a bullet casing. In all, they would have 6 statements from witnesses that were all consistent and gave them just some information to go on. But what they were given was still going to take them some time to figure out. The man who shot Janie was a short, thin African-American man. He could have been in his 30s or his 40s. He had a receding hairline. He was wearing a brown sports jacket, dark pants, and a collared shirt. The car was described as white and in the 1978 to 1984 Plymouth Champ or Dodge Colt body style. They also saw the car drove through the neighborhood rather than taking off down the main road. So they have a description of the car, they have a description of the man, they have a bullet casing, they have a timeline of the events, but not much else. They have no explanation as to why this happened or what the motive was. This was clearly not a robbery or a sexually motivated crime. It was like someone just wanted her to die, but they couldn't figure out why. Investigators, including lead detective Kim Brown, interviewed neighbors and friends and family. And while no one was landing on their suspect list yet, they also aren't ruling out someone close to her could have been harboring a deep hatred for her and just decided to act on that feeling. The fact that Al, who would normally go for a run on a Saturday morning with his wife, and the fact that he chose to stay home on this day, the day that she was murdered, raised some red flags for investigators. But based on what was being said and what information they had, the potential that Al hired a hitman just wasn't really adding up, so they didn't have anything to go off of. And to boot, as interviews continued and as more people were talked to, everyone who talked to Al in the days that followed Janie's murder mentioned how devastated he was. It's a feeling that flows through his words and into those who he is speaking with. It is undeniable that he is in a deep state of shock and grief. But the investigators don't really have a lot on their plates, so they can really focus on this case. This is the only murder in Fountain Valley, at least for the moment. And it was the first of the year. So as I mentioned in the beginning, this is truly a safe place to be. Then some pieces begin to fall together. Detective Kim Brown learns that there is a suspect still unidentified, but has been spotted multiple times in Janie's neighborhood in the days leading up to her murder. The idea that this man could have been a stalker begins to take shape. This man could have been a complete stranger, or investigators theorize that he could have been someone that Janie might have been having an affair with, or even the potential that Al had been having an affair and the other woman was trying to get rid of Janie. And as this idea is explored, the thought begins to take shape in the community that Al was responsible for Janie's death, for his wife's death, not because he pulled the trigger, but because the idea that he could have paid someone to do this for him got rooted into the community's mind. Al, though, was always cooperative. He gave investigators answers to their questions. He gave them access to information when they requested it. And when they asked him to take a polygraph test, he agreed and passed without a doubt. But it wasn't just the police looking for answers. Janie's friends are not ones to sit around and wait for other people to do work that they could be helping with. They print out hundreds of the composite sketches that police made and posted the photo along with a description of the car all over the place. They offered $25,000 for information, $10,000 of which was provided by United Airlines, and this would go on for months. The reward was eventually increased to $45,000, but even with the sole efforts of the investigation being on Janie's case, even with her friends and her family waking up every day to search for answers, and even with thousands of dollars being offered, the case went cold. That is, until nearly a year later, on April 10th of 1996. James Winger was arriving to work when he was approached by a man, shot once in the face, and then the shooter left the scene. This occurred in San Clemente, California, only about a 30-minute drive from Fountain Valley. Lead investigator Captain Christine Murray had seen a flyer for Janie's murder the summer prior, and she's like, this is oddly similar. And when it comes to James's case, at least, they have a little bit more information on their side because James shockingly survives. James states that there was nothing said. The man just walked up to him, pulled out his gun, shot him in the face, and left. James also tells investigators that he knows who wanted him dead. And this will change the direction of both his case and Janie's. A man by the name of Cole Allen. Cole Allen was the owner of Premium Commercial, which was a party planning business. But he also helped other businesses by loaning them money when they were struggling financially. These loans would, of course, be extremely high interest rates. Can you tell where I'm going with this yet? Maybe you can, maybe you can't. But because part of the loan required that these small business owners take out a life insurance policy totaling 3 times the amount of the loan and naming Cole as the sole beneficiary of that policy, that might give you a little bit of a clue. This man was just obscenely awful. He was a real piece of work. He targeted small businesses who were struggling under the guise that he was trying to help them out, and then would remind people that if they didn't pay back his loans, the insurance policy was bigger than the loan amount, which was constantly being hung over their heads. And because of that, he would get his money one way or another. Cole Allen had actually been on probation at this time after he had been tried for beating a man who borrowed money with a pipe after the man stopped making payments. There had also been speculation that Cole had killed a borrower by the name of Barry Skolnick by shooting him in a parking garage just a year prior, and Cole received a $2.5 million payout from that life insurance policy. When police learned all of this, though, they have to confirm that he isn't just waiting for people to die naturally before collecting the life insurance, but that he is actually setting out to kill these people. And this might be where you were wondering how this is connected to Janie. Janie was not a business owner. Was she keeping a secret? Interestingly, Cole actually died a couple of days prior to James being shot due to a heart attack. So that throws a whole wrench into things. While police do get access to his personal and business records, they can't find anything that connects him to Janie or Al. For that matter, they find themselves coming up empty-handed again. But another wrench, 10 days after James was shot, Cole Allen's wife gets an odd phone call. She says that a man on the other end of the line states his name was Paul Allen, that he was the one who shot James Wingert. James was dead and he was expecting her to pay him because he upheld his end of the deal. And now her husband was dead, so she needed to do it. So she calls the police and tells them this. So now we have a name. And they would come to find that Paul had a small business by the way of an auto parts store. He was loaned $30,000 with a 36% interest rate from Cole Allen. Paul is arrested, and when he is put in a lineup with 5 other men, James immediately points to him as the person who shot him in the face. Paul is pulled in for questioning, and he is, of course, denying everything. And then Captain Murray mentions that the man he shot in the face is alive and identified him. And Paul is visibly surprised by this. He is still denying involvement, though he begins acting very nervous. He tells Captain Murray that she doesn't have any proof and that James identified him because, quote, all black guys look the same to an old white dude. And Captain Murray just looks at him and is like, I didn't say he was an old white dude. So you're telling me that this person who was shot in the face, which you claim to know nothing about and didn't ever hear about in the news, you know that he's an old white man? Meanwhile, Paul's photo is being shown to the witnesses in Janie's murder, again, through a photo lineup, and none of them are able to identify this person. Paul doesn't actually look that much like the composite sketch, to be honest. But still, Paul shot James, so he's being prosecuted anyways for that, just not for Janie's murder. It is during this time, though, that Captain Murray is reading through transcripts that she finds an interesting comment that Paul had made. He said that Cole Allen was mad at another man by the name of Leonard Mundy because Leonard had shot the wrong person. So she starts to look at this Leonard guy. And what do you know? Leonard had taken out 2 loans from Cole, totaling the amount of $80,000. Turns out James Wingart and his wife Peggy, at the time of taking out those loans, lived in Fountain Valley. James used his home as collateral for the loan without Peggy knowing. He forged her signature. Cole then tries to take the property, but Peggy was like, absolutely not. She immediately realizes that her signature was fake and fights it with everything that she has. So she sues Cole for fraudulent business practices, which pisses Cole off. Peggy was going to testify in court on June 13th or 14th against Cole, and he just couldn't have that. James and Peggy's home was very close to Janie's and Al's home, and the turnoff for the neighborhoods were actually identical, like physically identical, making it very easy to mistake one neighborhood for another. Realizing this, Captain Murray suggests a new photo lineup, this time with Leonard's photo instead. And this time, every single witness pointed to Leonard. Leonard, at a crippling point with paying back his loan, is tasked to kill Peggy. So just to kind of like make sure that the connection's being made here, from the sounds of it, Cole would have people take out these massive loans. They would have a significant interest rate on them, so high that they weren't able to pay back their loans. He would also have those people take out a life insurance policy on themselves, with Cole being the beneficiary of that life insurance policy in case they died, so that way he could get his money. When they were inevitably unable to be making their payments, I am certain that people became desperate and they would say something along the lines of, I will do whatever you want. And Cole took advantage of that from certain people, tasking them to go out and get rid of other people that he determined were causing him problems. So Leonard, at a crippling point with paying back his loans, is tasked to kill Peggy. He makes a mistake and pulls into the wrong neighborhood. Even though Peggy and Janie don't look anything alike, they have similar habits. Leonard shot Janie thinking that it was Peggy and then let Cole know the deed was done. and I am sure that Cole was surprised to see Peggy when he walked into the courtroom. Prior to this, Leonard had no record, and it came out later that he was just given directions to the Wingard home and a grainy photo of Peggy based on the directions, and that he took a wrong turn. It was found that the home that he went to instead was that of Al and Janie's, where he then started stalking Janie and finally killed the wrong woman. I'm also astonished that it amazes me that somebody is able to be like, yeah, okay, I will kill this person to get out of the loan. I wish you could see my face right now. There's certain things that just don't make sense to me. That is one of them. Paul Aline was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison for the attack on James Wingard. Leonard Mundy was arrested and charged with the murder of Jane Carver, and he would be sentenced to life in prison without parole. Janie's legacy, though, has done some good. With her love of running, a marathon was set up to help raise funds to create scholarships for students who needed money to go to college, and 1,200 people signed up, and they raised $75,000 to give to students pursuing a higher education. This is another one of those tragic stories that sits really hard with me. This woman was literally just identified as the wrong person, and it was by a person who was desperate to gain his freedom, and once again made a huge and costly decision. And even if he had found the right person, the decision that they made was a terrible one. To end out this episode, I encourage all of you who run, if you ever find yourself in a situation where you feel anything but wonderfully safe, please use those legs that you have been practicing on and run. It is harder to hit a moving target than one that is standing still. So I highly encourage that. Your body knows what to do. Just trust it. Trust it. Thank you for listening. We will be back again next week. Bye. What is life without close calls with disaster? Thank you for listening. Don't forget to follow the podcast to be the first to hear the now weekly episodes. Join our subscription on Patreon, Apple, or Spotify today and immerse yourself in the haunting beauty of the great outdoors. For around $4 a month, you'll get exclusive access to the first episode of each month and early access to all other episodes, showcasing the morbid and mysterious side of nature. Please reach out with story requests, and if you have your own story, please email tragedywithaview@gmail.com for a chance to have your story featured on a later episode. Again, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.